The coffee cup shattered against the marble floor at exactly 2:47 a.m., but Victoria Castellanos didn't even flinch. Her eyes were locked on the security monitor, her hand frozen in midair where the cup had been seconds before. On the screen in front of her, something impossible was happening. The janitor, the man she barely noticed, the one who cleaned her 16,000-square-foot mansion while she slept, was kneeling outside her late husband's study. And he was crying. But that's not what made her drop the cup. It's what he was doing while he cried that stopped her heart completely. Let me take you back 3 hours. Victoria had been sitting in her private security room since midnight, doing what she did every night since installing 12 hidden cameras throughout her mansion. Watching, searching, obsessing. The blue glow from the monitors cast shadows across her face, making her look like a ghost haunting her own home. Which, in a way, she was. She'd been checking for theft, for betrayal, for proof that everyone, the housekeepers, the gardeners, the staff she paid generously, wanted something from her. In her world, everyone always wanted something. Money, connections, access to her billion-dollar tech empire. 18 months of widowhood had taught her that grief makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability makes you a target. But tonight, Camera 7 showed her something that didn't fit any pattern she knew. Marcus Brennan, the overnight janitor, appeared in the East Wing hallway at 11 p.m. An hour after his shift technically ended. Victoria's finger hovered over the pause button, her pulse hammering in her temples. Her business instincts, the ones that built her empire, that kept her 3 steps ahead of competitors, that never failed her, screamed that something was wrong. She watched him move slowly down the hallway, his shoulders slumped with an exhaustion that seemed to radiate through the screen. He stopped outside the study, the room she kept locked, the room she hadn't entered in 14 months, the room that still smelled like her husband's cologne and contained all his things exactly as he'd left them. Marcus wasn't trying to break in. He knelt down, pulled something from his jacket pocket, and placed it carefully at the threshold. Then he bowed his head. His shoulders shook. Even through the grainy black and white footage, Victoria could see his lips moving. He was saying something, or praying. She couldn't tell which. Victoria leaned closer to the screen, her reflection ghosting over the image. Her throat felt tight. What was he doing? She built an empire on reading people, on understanding motivations, on seeing through deception. But this made no sense whatsoever. She rewound the footage, watched it again. 12 seconds of a man she'd passed in hallways maybe 3 times, leaving something at her dead husband's door and weeping. The footage timestamp in the corner made her breath catch. Thursday, 11:17 p.m. She fast-forwarded through the archived recordings, her hands trembling slightly as she typed commands into the keyboard. Thursday, 1 week ago. There he was again. Same time. Same ritual. Same grief-stricken posture. 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. 4. 6 weeks. For 6 entire weeks, Marcus had been coming to her late husband's study after his shift ended, leaving something at the door, and mourning someone he supposedly never knew. Victoria zoomed in on the object he'd left tonight, enhancing the image until the pixels started to blur. A folded piece of paper. White, cheap, the kind you'd buy at a dollar store. And beside it, something else. Something small that caught the hallway light. Her chest constricted. She'd never found these papers. Mrs. DeWitt, her head housekeeper, must have cleaned them away each morning before Victoria emerged from her bedroom at noon, still wearing yesterday's clothes, still carrying yesterday's grief. Victoria switched to camera 4, tracking Marcus as he walked toward the service entrance. That's when she noticed things she'd never paid attention to during their brief, awkward encounters in the mansion. His shoes were held together with duct tape, silver against worn black leather. His winter jacket was too thin for December in Connecticut, the kind you'd find at a thrift store. One sleeve had a patch sewn on the elbow. He stopped at the back door, pulled out a phone with a cracked screen, and stared at it for a long moment. The angle of camera 4 let her see his face more clearly than she ever had in person. The lines around his eyes weren't from age. He couldn't be more than 35, maybe 36. They were from worry, from sleepless nights, from carrying weight that was too heavy for one person. His expression was raw fear mixed with determination. He typed something on his phone, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. His hands were shaking. Then he looked up, directly at camera 4. For 3 full seconds, he stared into the lens as if he knew she was watching, as if he could see her sitting in her surveillance room surrounded by screens and cold coffee and 18 months of paranoia. His eyes held something Victoria hadn't seen in years. Not in her business partners. Not in her so-called friends who disappeared after the funeral. Not in the mirror when she forced herself to look. Genuine concern. Not for himself. For someone else. Victoria's hand moved across the keyboard automatically, pulling up 6 weeks of archived footage. Every Thursday night. 11:17 p.m. Same hallway. Same study door. Same man leaving papers she never saw, honoring someone he supposedly never met. Her business instincts screamed trap, manipulation, long con. Her late husband Richard used to tease her about it, how she saw conspiracy and kindness, calculation in every gesture. "Not everyone wants something, Vic," he'd say with that smile that made her believe him. Some people are just good, but Richard was dead, and good people didn't exist in Victoria's world anymore. She was about to close the surveillance program, about to convince herself this was nothing, when she clicked on tonight's live feed one more time. 11:03 p.m. Current time. Marcus appeared on camera 7 again. But something was different tonight. Immediately, horribly different. He wasn't alone. Victoria zoomed in, her blood turning to ice water in her veins. There was a small backpack beside him on the hallway floor. Child-sized. Pink, with cartoon characters she couldn't make out through the camera resolution. And inside the study, inside the room she kept locked for 14 months, the room sealed with 3 deadbolts and a biometric scanner that only recognized her fingerprint, a light was on. A light Victoria didn't turn on. A light that shouldn't be possible. The door was open. Her hands flew across the keyboard, cycling through every camera angle. Kitchen empty. Library empty. Foyer empty. West wing empty. But the study had lights spilling into the hallway, and Marcus was standing outside it with a child's backpack, and none of this made any sense. Victoria grabbed her phone with shaking hands, pulled up the security app, and refreshed the live feed. The screen went black. Not just one camera. All of them. Every single feed she'd been watching for 3 hours went dark simultaneously. The backup generator kicked in. She heard it rumble to life in the basement, but the security system stayed dead. Black screens everywhere. 12 cameras. 12 blank monitors reflecting her pale, shocked face. In the sudden silence of her surveillance room, Victoria heard something that made her skin crawl. Footsteps. Not on the video footage. In her house. Right now. Real footsteps on real floors, growing louder. Coming closer. Someone was inside. Someone who knew how to kill her security system. Someone who'd been patient enough to wait 6 weeks, leaving papers outside a locked room, building trust or laying groundwork, or doing whatever this was. Victoria stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor too loudly. The footsteps stopped. Then they started again. Faster now. Coming for her. Where are you watching from? Drop your location below. And listen, if you don't hit that subscribe button right now, you're going to miss what happens next, and you'll be back here tomorrow begging for the link. Non-subscribers, comment below and tell me why you're choosing to miss out on the most shocking twist of the story. We see you. 6 months before Victoria installed those cameras. 6 months before she became the woman who watched screens instead of living life. 6 months before everything that's about to unfold. Let me take you back to when the prison walls were still being built. Victoria Castellanos stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her mansion's grand entrance, staring at manicured gardens she no longer walked through. It was 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 months after Richard's funeral, and she was still wearing black. Not because anyone expected it, because she couldn't imagine wearing anything else. The morning sunlight flooded the marble floors, making everything look sterile and perfect and absolutely empty. Her 16,000-square-foot mansion had become exactly what grief does to a home, a beautiful, expensive prison. The house staff moved like ghosts through the halls, speaking in whispers she didn't acknowledge. She built systems specifically to avoid human interaction. Voice-activated lights. Smart home technology that meant she never had to ask anyone for anything. Grocery deliveries came to the service entrance where Mrs. DeWitt, her head housekeeper, handled everything. Business meetings happened through video conferencing. She hadn't shaken a hand or looked someone in the eye in weeks. She was 42 years old and felt ancient. The house smelled like industrial cleaning products in absence. Every room echoed with footsteps that used to be Richard's but weren't anymore. Mrs. DeWitt managed the staff, but Victoria rarely saw them. She preferred it that way. People wanted things. People asked questions with pity in their eyes. People left. People died. Better to never let them close in the first place. When Mrs. DeWitt mentioned needing to hire a new overnight janitor, Victoria didn't even look up from her laptop. She was in her home office, door closed, reviewing quarterly reports she didn't care about for a company that ran itself. "Handle it," she said. "Just send me the background check to approve." The email arrived that afternoon. Marcus Brennan, 36, single father, worked 2 other janitorial positions, no criminal record, references from 3 previous employers all saying the same thing: reliable, thorough, quiet. Victoria scanned it in 40 seconds and clicked approve. She didn't care about his story, didn't want to know about his life. She cared about one thing only, that he'd stay invisible. The job was overnight deep cleaning, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which meant he'd work while she prowled her mansion at 3 a.m. unable to sleep, and they'd never cross paths. Perfect. He started the following Monday, while Victoria was in Tokyo pretending to care about a merger. When she returned 3 days later, the house gleamed in a way it hadn't in months. The air smelled different, less like chemicals, more like lemon and cedar, like someone had actually cared while cleaning instead of just going through motions. She noticed but didn't comment. The cardinal rule was simple: staff stayed out of sight. Break it and you're gone. She'd fired 3 people that year alone for daring to speak to her in hallways. The first time she actually saw Marcus was an accident neither of them planned. Victoria had been walking through her empty house at 3 a.m. Insomnia had become her constant, unwanted companion, when she turned a corner in the west corridor and nearly collided with him. He was pushing a cleaning cart, earbuds in, softly singing something she didn't recognize. Some old country song about loss or love, or whatever people sang about when they thought no one was listening. He startled so badly, he nearly dropped his spray bottle. Pulled out the earbuds immediately, his face flooding with something between fear and embarrassment. "Mrs. Castellanos, I'm so sorry. I thought you were asleep. I'll come back later. I can finish this wing." She raised one hand, cutting him off. Wanted to fire him on the spot for breaking the rule, for existing in her space, for making her acknowledge another human being when all she wanted was to be alone with her grief. But something stopped her. He wasn't looking at her with pity, wasn't calculating her net worth, or thinking about what he could get from her. Wasn't seeing the billionaire widow everyone else saw. He was looking exhausted, deep in the bones tired that comes from working 3 jobs and probably never sleeping. There was a healing bruise on his forearm, yellowish green, the kind you get from carrying too much or working too hard. His hands were rough with calluses. For just a moment, Victoria saw herself reflected in his eyes. Not the tech CEO, not the grieving widow, just another person awake at 3 a.m. when they should be sleeping. Another person carrying weight too heavy for one set of shoulders. It unsettled her more than the pity ever did. "Don't let it happen again," she said, and walked away before he could see that her hands were shaking. But it did happen again. 2 weeks later, Victoria had forced herself to enter Richard's study for the first time since his death. She needed to find his grandfather's watch, the one from World War II that Richard had treasured, so she could donate it with his clothes to the veterans' charity he'd supported. She'd been putting it off for months, but the charity had called again, gentle but persistent, and she couldn't avoid it anymore. She couldn't breathe in that room. Every object screamed Richard's absence. His reading glasses on the desk, his favorite pen, the book he'd been halfway through, bookmarks still holding his place like he might come back and finish it. Victoria was on the floor surrounded by inventory papers, tears streaming down her face in a way she never let herself cry anywhere else, when she heard the door creak open. Marcus stood in the doorway with his cleaning supplies frozen. He saw her tears before she could wipe them away, before she could pull the mask back on, before she could pretend to be the ice-cold billionaire everyone expected. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Mrs. DeWitt said this room was off limits. I didn't know you were in here. I'll come back." "Get out!" Her voice cracked like breaking glass. Get out! Get out! She was screaming now, something ugly and raw breaking open inside her chest. All the grief she'd been containing for 3 months exploded in that moment, and this stranger was witnessing it. He backed away immediately, hands raised like she was dangerous. But before he closed the door, before he disappeared and let her pretend this never happened, he said something that cracked through her rage like lightning through stone. I lost someone too. I know that sound. The door clicked shut. Victoria sat alone in the wreckage of her grief, his words echoing in the silence. How dare he? How dare he presume to understand her loss, her pain, her specific and personal devastation? That night, she opened her laptop with every intention of firing him. The email was already drafted. Your services are no longer required. Final paycheck will be processed within 7 days. Her finger hovered over the send button. 1 click and he'd be gone. 1 click, and she'd never have to think about him again. Then she saw something in her peripheral vision. A folded piece of paper that had been slipped under her bedroom door. She hadn't heard anyone approach. Hadn't heard footsteps or movement or anything. The paper was cheap, the kind from a dollar store, folded carefully. Inside, 1 sentence written in pencil on line paper. The watch is in his car's glove compartment. He showed it to me once. He said it saved his life in the war. I think he'd want his wife to have it. No signature. No explanation. Victoria read it 3 times, her heart pounding. Richard's grandfather's watch. In the car. The Bentley she hadn't opened since the accident because she couldn't bear to see the driver's seat where he'd been sitting when he died. How does the janitor know this? Why does he care? What kind of game is he playing? She crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. Then, 3 minutes later, retrieved it and smoothed it flat on her desk, reading it again by lamplight. At 4 a.m., she went to the garage, stood in front of the Bentley for 5 full minutes before she could make herself open the door. The interior still smelled like Richard's cologne. His sunglasses were still in the cup holder. She could barely breathe. The glove compartment opened with a click. And there it was, the watch in its velvet box, exactly where Marcus said it would be. Solid and real in Richard's. But underneath the box was something else. Something Victoria had never seen before. A photograph. Richard with a man in a janitor's uniform, both of them smiling at the camera like old friends. The timestamp in the corner read, 2 years ago. Richard knew Marcus. Her husband, who told her everything, who shared every detail of his day over dinner, who had no secrets, knew this janitor 2 years before Victoria ever hired him. And he never mentioned it once. Drop a fire if you're already hooked. And seriously, if you haven't subscribed yet, comment below with your excuse, because the next chapter reveals why Marcus had that photo, and you're going to be so mad you missed it. Your choice, but don't come crying to us later. Victoria couldn't sleep that night, couldn't stop staring at that photograph. Her husband with a janitor, smiling like old friends, dated 2 years ago. Richard, who told her everything, who shared every mundane detail of his day over dinner, who had made transparency and honesty the foundation of their marriage. Except apparently, he kept this secret. And if he kept this one, what else didn't she know? At 6 a.m., she called James, her head of security. He answered on the second ring, voice groggy. Mrs. Castellanos? Is everything? I need a complete background check on Marcus Brennan. Everything. Financial records, family, employment history, social media, parking tickets, everything. Her voice was cold, businesslike, the tone that made boardrooms go silent. James hesitated. Ma'am, we already did a full background check when Mrs. DeWitt hired him for the position. He came back clean. No criminal record, solid references. Deeper. She cut him off. I want to know what toothpaste he uses. I want to know his daughter's teacher's name. I want to know every detail of his life for the past 10 years. And I want it by this afternoon. She hung up before he could ask why. Paced her bedroom for the next 3 hours, watching sunrise paint the walls gold while her mind spun theories. The rational part of her brain, the part that built a billion-dollar empire, knew she was being paranoid. The photo could be innocent. Richard was friendly with everyone. The mailman knew his coffee order. Baristas at Starbucks asked about his day. He struck up conversations with strangers on the street. It had driven Victoria crazy sometimes, his openness, his belief that people were fundamentally good. But something about this felt different. Marcus knew about the watch. Richard had shown it to him, told him the story about how it saved his grandfather's life in the war. That wasn't small talk. That was personal. That was trust. Why? The report arrived at 2 p.m. Victoria locked herself in her office and read every single page. Marcus Brennan, 36 years old, single father. One daughter, Emma, age 8. Wife died 4 years ago after a brutal 18-month battle with stage 4 breast cancer. He worked 3 jobs to make ends meet, overnight janitor at 2 office buildings in her mansion. Lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in the cheapest part of town, the kind of neighborhood where sirens were background noise. Drove a 2004 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and 200,000 miles on it. No savings. No assets. Medical debt from his wife's treatment, $127,000. Child support obligations to no one because he had full custody. The girl attended public school, qualified for free lunch, participated in an after-school program for low-income families. His Facebook page was sparse and heartbreaking. Photos of Emma at the park, her small face lit up with joy despite wearing clothes that were clearly thrift store finds. Birthday parties in their tiny apartment with homemade cake and dollar store decorations. Emma's school art projects taped to walls. Nothing about Marcus himself. Nothing about his own life, his own pain, his own struggles. The last post was from 8 months ago, just 3 words. Having a rough week, but Emma's smile makes it worth it. 19 likes. Victoria closed the file and sat in silence. This man had nothing. Less than nothing. He was drowning in debt, working himself to death, raising a daughter alone in poverty. So why was he wasting time and energy leaving notes for a billionaire widow who could buy his entire apartment building without noticing the expense? She decided to watch him. Not through cameras. She didn't have those installed yet. Just direct observation. That night, she positioned herself in the library where she had a clear view of the main hallway through the partially open door. At exactly 10 p.m., she heard his car in the driveway, that struggling engine that sounded like it might give up at any moment. He exchanged brief words with Mrs. DeWitt at the service entrance, something about cleaning supplies, and then began his routine. Victoria watched him work for 2 hours straight. He was methodical and thorough, but there was something else she noticed. He handled her things with genuine care. The antique vases that cost more than his annual salary got dusted with the same gentle attention as the family photos she couldn't bring herself to pack away. He took time with corners, with details, with Richard's book collection that most cleaners would have just run a cloth over quickly. Most people would rush through a mansion this size, cutting corners, doing the minimum. Marcus didn't. At midnight, he took a break, sat down on the floor right there in the hallway, pulled out his phone with the cracked screen, and stared at it. Victoria was too far away to see what was on the screen, but she could see his shoulders start to shake. He was crying, silently, trying to hold it together, but failing. His whole body trembled with it. 5 minutes later, he wiped his face with the sleeve of his too-thin jacket, stood up, and continued working like nothing had happened. Victoria felt something crack in her chest. Something unwelcome and uncomfortable. Empathy. She didn't want to feel it. Didn't want to care about this stranger's pain. But watching him cry alone in her hallway, then pull himself together and keep working, kept playing on repeat in her mind. The next morning, she did something she hadn't done in months. She left her bedroom before noon. Mrs. DeWitt nearly dropped her clipboard when Victoria appeared in the kitchen at 9 a.m., fully dressed. "Mrs. Castellanos, can I get you breakfast? Coffee is everything. I want to speak with the janitor. Marcus Brennan. When does he arrive?" Mrs. DeWitt's eyes widened slightly. "Tonight at 10, ma'am. But if there's a problem with his work, I can handle." "No problem. I'll speak with him myself." She spent the entire day rehearsing what to say. How do you ask someone why your dead husband knew them? How do you demand answers without revealing you've been investigating, watching, obsessing over a photograph? By 9 p.m., she was positioned in the foyer, dressed in business attire like armor. Her heart was pounding harder than it should have been. She heard his car in the driveway, that struggling engine, the door that squeaked, footsteps on gravel. The service entrance opened. She stood up straighter, prepared herself. He rounded the corner and stopped dead when he saw her. "Mrs. Castellanos." His voice was careful, measured. "I thought you were in New York for the week. I changed my plans. I need to talk to you. Did I do something wrong? Because if it's about the study, I swear I didn't mean to intrude. I just thought, how did you know my husband?" The color drained from Marcus's face like someone had pulled a plug. For a moment, Victoria thought he might actually run. Then his shoulders slumped in what looked like relief mixed with resignation. "He didn't tell you." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact that seemed to hurt him. "Tell me what?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended, but underneath the sharpness was something else. Fear. Fear of what she was about to learn. Marcus set down his cleaning supplies. His hands were shaking. "Mrs. Castellanos, your husband saved my life. Literally saved it. 2 years ago, I was working the overnight shift at his office building downtown. I had Emma with me because I couldn't afford a sitter and the after-school program had closed for the week. She was sleeping in a break room while I cleaned the executive floors. I thought no one else was there, but Mr. Castellanos was working late. He found us." Marcus's voice cracked. "I thought I was fired. Thought I'd lose everything. I was already barely hanging on, and losing that job would have meant losing custody of Emma. But instead of firing me, your husband sat with me for 3 hours while I completely broke down. Told him everything. My wife's medical bills. The debt collectors calling at all hours. How I was failing Emma, failing as a father, failing at everything." He stopped, pulled something from his jacket pocket. An envelope. Thick, heavy. His hands trembled as he held it. "He made me promise not to tell you. Made me swear. But after he died, I couldn't just let you not know what kind of man he was. Wait. Before you scroll away, comment A if you think Richard gave him money, or B if it's something else entirely. And if you're still not subscribed to Olivia the Storyteller, genuinely why? We're pouring our hearts into these stories and you're really going to ghost us? Comment your reason below. We'll wait." Victoria stared at the envelope in Marcus's outstretched hand. Didn't take it. Couldn't make her arms move. "What is that?" Her voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere far away, like she was underwater. Marcus held it out like the paper itself might burn him. "It's complicated. Can we sit down? This isn't really a hallway conversation." She almost refused. Almost told him to leave and never come back. But her husband's name in his mouth, that photograph in the Bentley, the watch she found exactly where Marcus said it would be, she needed to know. Needed to understand what Richard had kept from her. She led him to Richard's study, the room she'd avoided since that day she'd found Marcus there, since she'd screamed at him to get out. The door stuck from 14 months of disuse. Inside, dust motes floated in the lamplight like tiny ghosts. Victoria sat in Richard's leather chair, and it felt like sacrilege. Like she was sitting in a sacred place she had no right to occupy. Marcus remained standing, uncomfortable in his work clothes surrounded by all this wealth. "Start from the beginning," she said. He took a breath that seemed to hurt. "That night when Mr. Castellanos found me with Emma at his office building, I was at my absolute lowest point. I'd been turned down for my 17th loan that week. Banks, credit unions, even those predatory payday loan places, everyone said no. My daughter was sleeping on a break room couch while I mopped floors at 2 a.m. And I was thinking." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I was thinking that Emma would be better off without me dragging her down. That the life insurance money could pay for her future. Give her chances I couldn't. You understand what I'm saying?" Victoria understood. Her hands gripped the armrest so tight her knuckles went white. "He stopped you. He sat with me until sunrise. Didn't judge me. Didn't offer empty promises or platitudes about how it gets better. He just listened. Really listened. And then he asked me one question. What would you do if money wasn't the problem? I told him the truth. I'd take Emma to the ocean. She'd never seen it. Her mother had always wanted to take her. We'd planned the trip before the diagnosis, but then everything fell apart and—" Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Mr. Castellanos asked for my address. I didn't think anything of it. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note in his handwriting. For Emma's ocean. For her future. For you to stay. No strings attached. No contract. No expectations. Just kindness from a stranger who had no reason to care. Victoria felt like she was falling through the floor. Richard gave away $50,000. Her Richard, who consulted her about every major financial decision, who balanced their checkbooks together every Sunday morning over coffee, who insisted on complete transparency in their marriage. He kept this enormous secret from her. Why? I couldn't accept it, Marcus continued. It was too much. Way too much. I tried to return the check, went to his office, told him I couldn't take charity. But he refused to take it back. Said I could either accept it or watch him donate it to a charity I'd absolutely hate. He had this way of joking until you stopped being stubborn, you know. Marcus smiled through his tears. Finally, we made an agreement. I'd accept the money, but I'd pay it back. Not with cash, I had none. But with service. I'd take care of his house like it was my own. I'd make sure nothing was ever out of place for his wife, for you, because he said you deserved peace in your own home. He said you deserved to live in beauty without having to think about maintaining it. Victoria's vision blurred. All these months, she thought the house staying so perfect was Mrs. DeWitt's management. But it was Marcus. For 14 months since Richard died, he'd been keeping a promise to a dead man. Keeping Richard's house perfect for Richard's wife. He talked about you constantly, Marcus whispered. Every time I came to update him on the house, to show him photos of what I'd fixed or cleaned or organized, he'd end up talking about you instead. How brilliant you were. How you built your company from nothing. How strong you were. How proud he was of you. How terrified he was of leaving you alone. He knew. Victoria's voice cracked completely. He knew he was dying. Marcus nodded slowly. He was diagnosed 6 months before the accident. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. Inoperable. He said you didn't know because if you knew, you'd have dropped everything to try to save him. You'd have spent every dollar, called in every favor, tried every experimental treatment on Earth. And he couldn't watch you do that. He said the best gift he could give you was letting you remember him healthy and whole, not wasted away in a hospital bed. The room spun. Victoria stood up, sat back down, stood again. Her legs wouldn't hold her properly. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. He had no right to make that decision for me. We could have had more time. We could have. He said you'd say exactly that. Marcus's voice was gentle. He made me promise that if anything happened to him before the cancer took him, I'd keep taking care of the house. That I'd make sure you were okay from a distance. Not intrude. Not push. Just be present in case you ever needed anything. He actually set aside money for me to continue working here for 5 years. Paid in advance. He didn't want you to ever feel obligated to keep me on staff. Victoria's entire world fractured. Everything she thought she knew about her husband, about their marriage, about the last year of her life, all of it built on lies. Protective lies. Loving lies. Lies told because Richard thought he was sparing her pain. But lies nonetheless. There's more, Marcus said quietly. He finally handed her the envelope. She opened it with fingers that had gone completely numb. Inside was a letter in Richard's handwriting, the ink slightly faded but still clearly his. My darling Victoria, it began. If you're reading this, then Marcus kept his promise to deliver it exactly 1 year after my death. I'm sorry for lying to you. I'm sorry for hiding my diagnosis. I'm sorry for playing God with the time we had left together. But I'm not sorry for trying to protect you from watching me waste away. You would have sacrificed everything, and I couldn't bear it. Marcus showed me something important that night I found him in my office building. He showed me that even in our darkest moments, we can choose how to leave the world. He chose to stay for his daughter, to fight through the pain for her sake. I'm choosing to go before you have to watch the man you love disappear piece by piece. The cameras in this envelope, install them if you must. I know your fear. I know you'll need to control something after I'm gone, need to feel safe in some way. But please, my love, when you watch those cameras, don't just look for threats. Look for Marcus. Look for the good I'm leaving behind for you. Trust one person. Just one. Start there. I love you infinitely, Richard. Victoria's hands shook so violently she almost dropped the letter. Cameras. Richard knew she'd install security cameras. The envelope contained 8 small boxes, professional-grade security cameras with complete installation instructions. He predicted her paranoia, her need for control, her descent into isolation. He'd planned for it, and he'd weaponized it, turning her surveillance into a way to force her to see Marcus's kindness, to see that not everyone was a threat. She didn't know whether to scream or laugh or cry, so she did all three. Sat there in her dead husband's chair and broke apart completely while Marcus stood there witnessing it. This stranger who knew her husband's secrets, who'd been taking care of her from the shadows for over a year. If this just broke your heart, drop a broken heart below. And listen, those of you who still aren't subscribed to Olivia the Storyteller, you're about to miss the most devastating reveal yet. This story gets darker before it gets better. Non-subscribers, tell us in the comments why you'd rather miss out than hit that button. We genuinely want to know. Victoria installed the cameras herself, all 8 of them that Richard had left her, plus 4 more she added on her own, because if she was going to do this, she was going to do it right. It took 3 days of climbing ladders, drilling tiny holes, running wires through walls, and reading installation manuals by lamplight. She didn't tell Mrs. DeWitt, didn't tell James, didn't tell anyone. This was between her and Richard's ghost, this strange final gift he'd left her. She positioned them exactly according to his diagram. Foyer, main hallway, kitchen, garage, east wing corridor, west wing corridor, library, and the exterior service entrance. Each camera was small, nearly invisible, professional-grade equipment that must have cost Richard thousands of dollars. He'd researched this for months while dying, planning for her paranoia like it was just another problem to solve. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her husband encouraging her surveillance obsession from beyond the grave. But as she mounted the final camera and tested the feed, she understood why he'd done it. Richard knew she needed to see before she could believe anything. Seeing was always her way. Data, proof, evidence. Trust had never been in her vocabulary. The system connected to her laptop, her phone, and the large monitor in her office. 12 cameras total now covering every corner of her mansion. She could watch every moment, every person, every movement. Perfect control. Exactly what she'd been craving since Richard died. The first week, she watched everything obsessively. Mrs. DeWitt directing the daytime staff with military precision. The gardeners working outside, trimming hedges she never looked at. Grocery deliveries arriving at the service entrance. And Marcus, arriving every single night at exactly 10 p.m., leaving at 6 a.m. like clockwork. She watched him work with an intensity that should have felt creepy but instead felt necessary. Watched him take his midnight break in the hallway, sitting on the floor with his phone, scrolling through something that made his face tighten with stress. She zoomed in one night, caught a glimpse of a screen before he shifted position. Medical bills, past due notices in red, a text conversation with someone labeled Emma's school that he kept typing responses to, deleting them, trying again. The stress on his face was visceral, painful to witness. But when he cleaned, something changed in him completely. He became almost peaceful, meticulous with Richard's things in a way that made Victoria's throat go tight. The books got arranged by height and color. The antique clock in the hallway got wound every 3 days without fail. The family photos got dusted with a softness that seemed wrong for someone who was just an employee. He was keeping his promise to a dead man. But why? The money was paid. The debt was settled. He could slack off, do the bare minimum, and no one would ever know. She would never notice. Except now she was noticing everything. Week 2 brought patterns she couldn't ignore. Marcus arrived early every Thursday night, 9:45 p.m. instead of his usual 10 o'clock start time. On those nights, he went directly to Richard's study first, the room she'd finally unlocked and given him access to after their conversation. But he didn't clean it on Thursdays. He stood there for exactly 10 minutes, silent, head bowed like he was praying or meditating or communing with Richard's memory. Then he'd leave something on the desk and continue with his normal work. Victoria, watching the live feed, would wait until he moved to another wing of the house, then rush downstairs to see what he'd left. The first time, she found a child's drawing on construction paper. Crayon stick figures labeled Me and Daddy, and in smaller, shakier letters, Mommy in Heaven. At the bottom in a child's careful handwriting, Thank you for helping my daddy. Love, Emma. There were 6 of these drawings now, 1 for each Thursday. 6 weeks of a little girl thanking a man she'd never met, never knowing he was dead, never knowing she was drawing thank you notes to a ghost. Victoria had found them during her sporadic visits to the study over the past weeks, had assumed Mrs. DeWitt was leaving them for some reason. But no, it was Marcus, his daughter drawing pictures for the man who'd saved her father's life. Victoria sat in Richard's chair one Thursday night, holding a drawing of a rainbow with Emma's name signed at the bottom in purple crayon, and felt something inside her chest begin to thaw. She didn't want it to. Didn't want to feel anything for this man and his daughter. But the thawing happened anyway. Week 3 brought the moment that changed everything. Victoria was reviewing archived footage from 3 nights ago because she'd fallen behind on her obsessive watching, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of video. She saw Marcus in the library at 2 a.m., dusting the high shelves with his usual care. Then a heavy hardcover book fell, dropped directly onto his foot. She watched him crumple to the floor, biting down hard on his own hand to keep from crying out. He didn't want to wake her. He sat there for 5 full minutes, his foot visibly swelling, before he finally stood up, limped back to his cleaning cart, and continued working. He didn't stop until 6 a.m., despite the obvious pain. The next night, same limp. The night after that, worse. She fast-forwarded to tonight's live feed. Marcus could barely walk. But he was here anyway, cleaning her mansion, keeping his promise to Richard. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. She grabbed her phone and called her personal physician at midnight without thinking twice. "Dr. Morrison, I need you at my house tomorrow night at 10 p.m. "No, I'm not sick. I need you to examine one of my staff members. He won't ask for help himself, so we're going to insist." But when she pulled up the live feed to confirm Marcus's schedule for the next night, the screens showed something that stopped her heart completely. It was 1:30 in the morning. Marcus was standing in her foyer, and he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, early 30s, wearing professional attire and holding a leather briefcase. Victoria didn't recognize her, had never seen her before on any of the footage. They were talking intensely, their voices too low for the cameras to pick up clearly. The woman pulled papers from her briefcase and spread them across the entrance table. Marcus kept shaking his head, his body language screaming resistance. The woman pointed at something on the papers, insistent. Marcus's shoulders slumped in defeat. He signed something. The woman handed him an envelope, and Marcus stared at it like it might explode. The woman said something else, patted his shoulder in what might have been sympathy or reassurance, and left through the front door. Marcus stood alone in the foyer, envelope in hand, looking like a man who'd just been shattered into pieces. Then he did something that made Victoria's blood turn to ice. He looked directly at the camera, directly at where he knew she might be watching. His expression was pure desperation mixed with shame and fear, and he mouthed 3 words clearly enough that Victoria could read his lips. "I'm so sorry." The envelope fell from his hands onto the marble floor. Paper scattered, and Victoria could just barely make out a letterhead on one of them. Child Protective Services. Stop right there. Comment police car light if you're panicking right now. Is Marcus in trouble? Is Emma being taken? You need to subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now, because what happens next is going to wreck you emotionally, and you'll hate yourself for missing it. Non-subscribers, seriously, what are you doing? Comment below and defend your choice not to subscribe while this man's life falls apart. Victoria didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. By 6 a.m., she was deep into research about Child Protective Services procedures, parental rights, custody interventions, foster care placements. Her laptop screen glowed in the dark office as she absorbed information she never thought she'd need to know. By 8 a.m., she called her attorney, woken him up actually, and demanded he find her the best family law specialist in the state. By 9 a.m., she had answers, and every single one of them made her blood boil. An anonymous complaint had been filed 3 weeks ago claiming Marcus Brennan leaves his 8-year-old daughter home alone during his overnight shifts, that the child shows signs of neglect, that the living conditions are inadequate for a growing child. The investigation was already in its final stage. If the social worker's report came back unfavorable, Emma Brennan would enter foster care by the end of the week. Taken from her father, placed with strangers, the system would swallow her whole. Victoria's hands actually shook with rage. Anonymous complaint. Someone had targeted Marcus specifically. Someone who knew his schedule, knew about Emma, knew exactly how to destroy him. She cycled through possibilities in her mind with the same ruthless efficiency she used in business. Who knew about Marcus's multiple jobs? Who had access to information about his daughter? Who would benefit from destroying him? Then it clicked. Mrs. DeWitt had mentioned something last month about firing 2 daytime staff members for theft. Catherine Werner and David Stroud. They'd been caught stealing petty cash, maybe a few $100s total. Victoria had pressed charges because she didn't tolerate theft. And Mrs. DeWitt had mentioned in passing that they'd asked questions about the overnight janitor, seemed oddly curious about his hours, his personal life. At the time, Victoria hadn't thought anything of it. This was revenge. They were taking revenge on Victoria by destroying Marcus, using his daughter as a weapon. She grabbed her phone and called James. I need everything on Catherine Werner and David Stroud, the staff we terminated 6 weeks ago. Phone records, social media, any connections to Child Protective Services, everything. James hesitated. Ma'am, that's bordering on illegal. I don't care. That man is losing his daughter because of my house, my staff, my failure to properly vet people. Fix it. Now. She hung up before he could argue. Check the security cameras out of habit. Marcus hadn't come to work last night. First absence in 18 months of perfect attendance. She pulled up his number from the employee files, fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. It rang 6 times. Then a small voice answered. Hello. A child. Emma. Victoria's throat closed up completely. Hi, sweetheart. Is your daddy there? He's sleeping. He worked really hard yesterday and came home really tired. Are you calling about the lady with the clipboard? Because Daddy said I'm not supposed to answer questions without him present. Smart girl. Protective. Already learning to guard herself. Victoria's heart broke into pieces. No, honey. I'm not calling about that. I'm a friend of your daddy's. Can you tell him Victoria called? It's very important. Victoria like the Queen. The child's voice brightened. Sure. Like the Queen. Okay. Daddy says queens are strong and brave and help people when they're in trouble. Are you going to help my daddy? He's been really sad a lot lately. He tries to hide it, but I can tell. Victoria ended the call because she couldn't speak anymore. Sat in her surveillance room surrounded by screens and made a decision that would have horrified the person she was 18 months ago. She was going to help. Not just with money, though God knows she had plenty of that. This required something she hadn't done in years. Personal involvement. Actual human connection. She dressed in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater, nothing that screamed billionaire. Took her oldest car, a 5-year-old sedan she kept specifically for occasions when she didn't want to be recognized. Found Marcus's address in the employee files. A apartment complex on the east side of town, the kind of place with peeling paint and chain-link fences and children's toys scattered in the parking lot. She climbed 3 flights of exterior stairs to apartment 3C. Knocked. There was a long silence, then shuffling footsteps. The door opened just a crack, chain still attached. Marcus stared at her like she was a ghost or a hallucination. Mrs. Castellanos? His voice was hoarse, broken. I need to talk to you. It's about Emma. His face crumbled completely. How do you know about? Did they call you? Are you here to testify or something? Because I can explain. I'm here to help. Let me in. He hesitated for a long moment, then unlatched the chain with shaking hands. The apartment was tiny, maybe 400 square feet total. Clean but painfully threadbare. Emma's crayon drawings covered every single wall, bright spots of color in an otherwise gray existence. A small kitchen table served as desk, dining area, and craft station all at once. Through an open door, she could see one bedroom decorated with dollar store princess stickers. Emma's room, which meant Marcus slept on the couch. She could see the folded blanket, the pillow with a permanent depression where his head rested night after night. How did you know? Marcus asked. He wasn't angry, just utterly defeated. I have cameras, Marcus. I saw the social worker. I did research. This complaint, it's retaliation from former staff members I fired. Catherine Werner and David Stroud. They're using your daughter to hurt me through you. And that's not going to happen. He sat heavily on the couch like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. It doesn't matter why they filed it. The facts are still facts. I do leave Emma alone at night. 2 hours every single night while I work. I can't afford childcare for those hours. The after-school program closes at 8. My shifts start at 10. She's asleep. Doors are locked. My neighbor checks on her through the wall, but legally. He spread his hands in helpless resignation. I'm negligent. The social worker is right. I'm failing my daughter. Then we change the facts. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'm hiring you as my live-in estate manager. Salary of $85,000 annually. Full benefits included. Housing provided in the East Wing guest house. 3 bedrooms, full kitchen, separate entrance. You'll manage evening security checks, coordinate with contractors, oversee maintenance schedules. Real job, real work, Marcus. Not charity. Emma lives with you on the property. You're never more than 50 yards away during your entire shift. Problem solved. Marcus stared at her like she was speaking a language he didn't understand. Why? It was the only word he could manage. Victoria looked around the apartment, at the drawings covering every wall, at the carefully maintained poverty, at the evidence of a man who was barely surviving but making absolutely sure his daughter never knew how close they were to losing everything. Because Richard was right. I needed to see it before I could believe it. I've been watching you for weeks through those cameras. You're not just keeping a promise to a dead man. You're breaking yourself into pieces to keep your daughter whole. I've spent 18 months isolated, paranoid, convinced everyone wants something from me. And you never asked for anything. Not once. Even now, facing losing Emma, you didn't call me. Didn't beg. Didn't try to leverage your connection to Richard. You're exactly what he said you were. She stood up. The social worker returns Thursday for her final evaluation. You have 3 days to move into the guest house, establish legal residency, show stable income and appropriate housing. I'll have my attorney draft the employment contract today. We're going to save your daughter, Marcus, whether you think you deserve it or not. She was at the door, hand on the knob, when Marcus spoke. His voice was raw, destroyed. There's something else. Something I didn't tell you about Richard. Something that's going to make you hate me forever. Victoria turned slowly. Then tell me now. He didn't die in an accident. Marcus's voice broke completely. And it's my fault. Okay, we're freaking out. Comment if you're literally shaking right now. What does Marcus mean Richard's death wasn't an accident? You need to subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now, because this is about to get dark. And non-subscribers, explain yourself in the comments. Why are you actively choosing to miss the biggest twist of a story? We'll wait. Victoria felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. What do you mean your fault? Her voice came out like ice, but inside she was pure fire, burning with the need to understand. Marcus looked like he might actually vomit. His face had gone gray. The night of the accident, November 19th, Mr. Castellanos was driving to his office for a late meeting with investors. But that wasn't the only reason he was out that night. He was coming to see me first. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and showed her a text conversation. Victoria read it with fingers that had gone completely numb. Richard's name at the top of the screen made her chest constrict. His words from beyond the grave. Richard. Emergency. Emma okay? Marcus. Hospital. She collapsed at school. They think appendicitis. I'm a county general. I don't have insurance. They're saying surgery will cost. Richard. On my way. Don't let them wait. Marcus. It's okay, I'll figure out. Richard. 20 minutes. Wait for me. The timestamp read 7:43 p.m. Victoria knew from the police report, from the investigation she demanded, from the paperwork she'd read 1,000 times trying to make sense of senseless loss, that the accident happened at 8:05 p.m. 22 minutes after that last text. He was coming to you. Victoria's vision tunneled. He was coming to pay for Emma's surgery. Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face unchecked. I told him not to. I begged him to just meet me later, after his investor meeting. But he said no child should have to wait for surgery because of money. He was driving fast because he wanted to reach us before they took Emma back to the operating room. The rain was so heavy that night. The roads were slick, and he was rushing because of me. Victoria sat down hard on Marcus's threadbare couch before her legs gave out completely. The official police report had said Richard lost control on a curve, hydroplaned on the wet road, hit a concrete barrier at high speed. Died on impact. The police found nothing suspicious. No other vehicles involved. No mechanical failure. No explanation except bad weather and terrible timing. She'd always wondered why he was on that particular road. It wasn't his normal route to the office. Now she knew. He'd been detouring to County General Hospital. To save a janitor's daughter. To keep a promise to a man he'd only met twice. Emma's surgery went fine, Marcus continued, his voice breaking apart. They did it emergency when she took a turn for the worse and couldn't wait any longer. By the time Mr. Castellanos should have arrived at the hospital, I had 17 missed calls from him on my phone. Then Mrs. DeWitt called, told me there'd been an accident, that he was gone. Emma was coming out of anesthesia, asking for me, crying for her daddy, and I was locked in a hospital bathroom screaming into my hands, knowing I'd killed the man who'd saved my life. Victoria couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was hearing. The man she'd been watching for weeks, the man she'd been learning to trust, the man she decided to help, he was the reason Richard was dead. The reason she was a widow. The reason she'd spent 18 months in absolute hell. Why are you telling me this now? Her voice sounded distant, mechanical, like it belonged to someone else. Because you're offering me everything. A home for Emma. A real salary. Security. A future. And you deserve to know exactly what you're saving. I'm the reason you lost your husband, Mrs. Castellanos. I'm the reason you spent all this time alone in that mansion. Every single night I clean your house, I'm walking through the life I destroyed. Every time I dust his photographs, I see the man who died rushing to help me. I've wanted to tell you since the day I learned your address, but Richard made me promise. Made me swear that if anything happened to him, I'd never tell you about that night. That I'd take care of you from a distance, never let you know, never burden you with the guilt he knew I'd carry forever. Marcus stood and walked to the small window, his back to her. But I can't accept your help based on a lie. I can't let you save me and Emma when you don't know what you're actually saving. So now you know the truth. Do whatever you need to do. Fire me. Hate me. Call the police if you want. Whatever you choose, I understand completely. He didn't turn around. Didn't watch her face. Gave her privacy for whatever came next. Grief or rage or violence. He was prepared for all of it. Victoria sat in complete silence for 3 full minutes. Marcus didn't move. Didn't speak. Barely seemed to breathe. Finally, she found her voice. Turn around. He did. His face was absolutely wrecked, destroyed by guilt and grief and anticipation of her hatred. Victoria stood slowly and walked toward him. Every step felt like walking through broken glass. When she was close enough to see every line of pain etched into his face, close enough to see the exact shade of his suffering, she spoke. My husband chose to drive in that storm. He chose to speed. He chose to help your daughter over his own safety. That's exactly who Richard was. He died doing what he wanted to die doing, saving a child. If you hadn't called him that night, he would have found someone else to save. Some other emergency. Some other person in crisis. He couldn't help himself. Helping people was hardwired into who he was. She took a shaking breath. For 18 months, I've been angry at God, at fate, at the rain, at the universe itself for taking him from me. And you've been carrying guilt that isn't yours to carry. Richard would be absolutely furious with you for that. He'd tell you to let it go, to focus on Emma, to accept help when it's offered. So that's exactly what you're going to do. I don't deserve. Stop. Victoria's voice cracked wide open. Richard saw something in you worth dying for. I'm starting to see it too. Maybe that's his final gift to me, forcing me to see past my walls, my paranoia, my isolation. You're moving into the guest house. You're taking the job. You're keeping your daughter. And you're going to let me help you the way Richard would have wanted. Not because you deserve it, but because Emma deserves it. Because Richard's last act on earth shouldn't result in that little girl losing her father too. Do you understand me? Marcus nodded, unable to speak through his tears. Victoria moved toward the door, then stopped with her hand on the knob. One more thing. Those cameras in my mansion, I've been watching you for weeks. I've seen how you grieve, how you work, how you sacrifice everything for Emma. I've seen you leave her drawings in Richard's study every Thursday, thinking I'd never know. I've seen you honor a promise to a dead man when you could have just walked away. That's not the behavior of someone who deserves punishment. That's the behavior of someone who deserves a second chance. She opened the door. Pack your things. I'll have the guest house ready by tomorrow. The social worker visits Thursday. We have 2 days to build you a life Richard would be proud of. She was halfway down the exterior stairs when she heard it through the thin apartment walls. Marcus, sobbing with complete relief, and behind him a small voice asking, "Daddy, why are you crying? Is the Queen here?" Victoria ran the rest of the way to her car before Emma could see her own tears. If you're crying right now, drop loudly crying face in the comments. This is getting real. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller if you haven't already, because what happens next is going to destroy you in the best way possible. And non-subscribers, we're confused. You've watched this far and you still won't hit subscribe? Comment your excuse below. Make it good. The East Wing guest house hadn't been used in 5 years. Dust covered every surface. The furniture was outdated. The kitchen hadn't seen groceries since Richard's parents last visited. But Victoria spent all of Tuesday turning it into a home. Mrs. DeWitt watched with barely concealed shock as her employer, who usually avoided human interaction entirely, personally supervised cleaners, ordered furniture delivery on expedited shipping, and stocked the kitchen with groceries herself. "Ma'am, if you don't mind my asking, what exactly is happening here?" "Marcus and his daughter are moving in. He's been promoted to estate manager. This is now his permanent residence." Victoria didn't look up from arranging fresh towels in the bathroom. Mrs. DeWitt's face cycled through confusion, understanding, and something that looked surprisingly like respect. Mr. Castellanos would have liked that very much. Victoria paused, towel in hand. "You knew about Richard and Marcus? About the hospital that night? About your husband rushing to help?" "No, I didn't know the details. But I knew Mr. Castellanos had a special fondness for Marcus. I've been managing this household for 15 years, ma'am. I noticed things." She hesitated, then continued. "And I've noticed that since you started actually seeing Marcus instead of avoiding him, you've been different. Lighter somehow. Less haunted." Victoria felt exposed, vulnerable. "I'm just helping an employee. Nothing more." "Of course, ma'am." But Mrs. DeWitt smiled knowingly as she left to organize the cleaning crew. By Wednesday afternoon, the guest house absolutely gleamed. 3 bedrooms furnished and ready. 1 for Marcus with actual adult furniture instead of a couch. 1 for Emma decorated with soft yellows and whites, princess-themed, because Victoria had asked Mrs. DeWitt what 8-year-old girls liked. And 1 converted into a study and playroom with a desk for homework and shelves for toys Victoria had ordered online at midnight. Full kitchen stocked with food. Living room with comfortable furniture, and wall space specifically left empty for Emma's drawings. This wasn't just housing. It was a home. A real home. Marcus arrived at exactly 4 p.m. in his dying Honda that sounded like it was taking its last breath. The car was packed with everything they owned in the world. 7 cardboard boxes, 3 battered suitcases, Emma's bicycle with training wheels, and a lifetime of struggle that was finally, maybe, coming to an end. Emma emerged from the passenger seat like something from a fairy tale. Tiny, dark-haired, with enormous eyes that took in the mansion and manicured grounds like she'd been transported to Disneyland. "Daddy, did we win something?" Her voice carried clear across the lawn. "Is this where the Queen lives?" Victoria watched from the main house window, her heart squeezing painfully in her chest. She hadn't actually met Emma yet, hadn't figured out how to interact with children. But then Emma spotted her standing there and waved enthusiastically with her whole arm. Before Marcus could stop her or warn her or do anything, she was running across the lawn, pigtails flying behind her like flags. Victoria panicked. Opened the front door, because what else could she possibly do? Emma stopped on the porch steps, suddenly shy, her confidence evaporating. "Are you Victoria the Queen?" "I'm Victoria. You must be Emma. My daddy says you're saving us. Thank you so much." And then Emma launched forward without warning and wrapped thin arms around Victoria's waist. Hugged her like Victoria was solid ground after drowning in an ocean. Like Victoria was safety itself. Victoria froze completely. She hadn't been hugged in 18 months. Hadn't touched another human being with affection since Richard died. Her arms moved automatically, awkwardly, around the small body. Emma felt like bones and hope and trust. Pure, Uncomplicated trust. You're welcome, sweetheart. The words came out strangled. The actual move took about 2 hours. Marcus insisted on carrying everything himself, pride making him refuse help, but Victoria found herself grabbing boxes anyway. Mrs. DeWitt mobilized the entire staff like a general commanding troops. The daytime housekeeper brought fresh-baked welcome cookies. The gardener took Emma to see the koi pond and taught her their names. It was chaos and warmth and something Victoria's mansion hadn't felt in years. Life. Actual life. Emma explored her new bedroom with reverent, almost religious wonder. Touched everything gently like it might disappear if she wasn't careful. Daddy, look! I have my own closet. My own bathroom. Is this real? Are we really staying here? Marcus stood in the doorway completely overcome, unable to speak. Victoria appeared behind him. The social worker comes tomorrow at 5 p.m. Your employment contract is on the kitchen counter. First salary deposit hits your account Friday. I've arranged for Emma to transfer to Riverside Elementary, 3 miles from here. Much better school district. Classes start Monday morning. You have the weekend to settle in and get adjusted. Mrs. Castellanos, I don't know how to thank you for. You don't need to thank me. Just be here. Be present for Emma. Do your job well. Keep your daughter safe and happy. That's all Richard would want from either of us. She turned to leave, to give him privacy, but Emma's voice stopped her cold. Victoria the Queen, will you have dinner with us tonight? We're making spaghetti. Daddy makes really, really good spaghetti. Victoria hadn't eaten dinner with another person since Richard died. Hadn't sat at a table that wasn't empty and echoing. Every instinct she had screamed to decline, to retreat to her surveillance room, to maintain safe distance. But Emma's hopeful face, Marcus's carefully neutral expression, trying not to influence her decision, and the smell of garlic and tomatoes already drifting from the guest house kitchen, something broke inside her. I'd like that very much. Dinner was chaotic in the best possible way. Emma talked nonstop about her new room, her new school, the koi pond, the fact that she could see actual stars from her bedroom window. Marcus was quiet, watchful, still processing everything that had happened in the last 48 hours. Victoria sat at their small kitchen table and remembered what it felt like to be part of something, to belong somewhere. The spaghetti really was good. Emma insisted on showing Victoria every single drawing she'd made in the last year, including the ones meant for Richard. Daddy said these were for his friend who helped us when we needed it most. Was that your husband? Emma's complete innocence was a knife straight through Victoria's heart. Yes, sweetheart. That was my husband. I'm sorry he died. My mommy died too. It's really, really sad. But Daddy says people we love become stars in the sky so they can always watch over us and keep us safe. Maybe your husband and my mommy are watching together now. Maybe they're friends up there. Victoria excused herself at 8 p.m. because the emotion was completely overwhelming her. Walked back to the main house with Emma's words echoing in her head. Maybe they're watching together now. She went straight to her surveillance room out of habit, pulled up the cameras, watched Marcus tuck Emma into her new bed, singing softly. Watched him stand in the doorway after she fell asleep, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs of relief and gratitude. Then Marcus did something unexpected. He walked to Emma's window and looked directly toward the main house, toward where he must know Victoria was watching. He mouthed 2 words clearly. Thank you. Victoria's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Mrs. Castellanos? This is Agent Sarah Reeves from the FBI. We need to talk about your security system immediately. We've detected unauthorized access to your home network. Someone's been watching your cameras. Not just recently, for months. And tonight, they've breached your perimeter. They're somewhere on your property right now. Do not approach. Do not alert anyone. We're 3 minutes out. Victoria's blood turned to absolute ice. She pulled up all the live camera feeds with shaking hands. Every camera showed normal. Then she saw it. A shadow moving past the guest house in the darkness, heading directly for Emma's window. Her email pinged. New message. No sender name. Just 6 words. You took everything from me. Now I take everything from you. Stop scrolling. Comment SOS button if you're freaking out. Who's on the property? Is Emma in danger? You absolutely must subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now, because this is about to get intense. Non-subscribers, this is your last chance. Comment below and tell us why you're choosing to miss the climax of the story. What's your excuse? We're genuinely curious. Victoria moved on pure instinct. Grabbed her phone, triggered the silent alarm to James with shaking fingers, then typed out a text to Marcus with hands that barely worked. Lock Emma's door. Stay inside. Police coming. Then she did something completely reckless, something the old Victoria would never have done. She ran toward the guest house. The FBI had said don't approach. She didn't care. No one was going to threaten a child on her property. Not after she'd spent 2 days building them a safe haven. Not after Richard had died, trying to protect that same child. She was wearing yoga pants and an old t-shirt. No weapon. No plan. Just raw fury and protective instinct she didn't even know she possessed. The shadow was at Emma's window now. She could see the shape clearly in the moonlight. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dark clothes. Her security lights should have triggered automatically when anyone approached the guest house. They didn't. Disabled. This person knew her security system, knew her property layout, knew exactly how to move unseen. This was personal. Victoria circled wide, approaching from the side to avoid being spotted. The guest house was completely dark except for Emma's small nightlight casting a soft glow through her window. Inside, she could see Marcus silhouetted against that light, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling 911. The shadow sensed movement and turned. And Victoria recognized the face illuminated by Emma's nightlight. Catherine Werner, the staff member she'd fired 6 weeks ago for theft. The one who'd filed the anonymous CPS complaint. The one who'd been watching Victoria's security cameras for months. You. Victoria's voice cut through the night air like a blade. Catherine didn't run. Instead, she smiled. Actually smiled. Hello, Mrs. Castellanos. Funny how things work out, isn't it? I spent 6 months planning to rob you blind. Studied your security system. Learned every pattern. Waited for the perfect moment to strike. And then you handed me something so much better than money. Revenge that actually hurts. She was holding something in her right hand. Victoria couldn't see what it was in the darkness, but every instinct screamed danger. You fired me for stealing a few $100s in petty cash. Humiliated me in front of the entire staff. Called the police on me. Do you have any idea what that did to my reputation? My career. No one will hire me now. My husband left me. My kids blame me for destroying our family. All because you couldn't let $300 go. You were stealing, Victoria said, edging closer slowly. And now you're threatening a child. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm teaching you about consequences, about what it feels like to lose everything. That janitor and his little brat, you care about them. I've been watching for months. Watched you help them move in today. Watched you eat dinner with them like some pathetic found family trying to replace what you lost. It's disgusting. And it ends tonight. The object in Catherine's hand caught moonlight. A knife. Victoria's heart stopped completely. The FBI is 3 minutes away. Security is coming. You can't. 3 minutes is plenty of time to shatter your entire world. Plenty of time for that little girl to learn what real loss feels like. Time for you to watch and do absolutely nothing, just like I had to watch my life fall apart because of you. She moved toward Emma's window. Victoria didn't think. Just lunged. Crashed into Catherine with her full body weight. They hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from Victoria's lungs. Catherine was stronger, angrier, fueled by months of rage. The knife swung wildly. Victoria felt it graze her arm, hot searing pain, blood soaking through her sleeve. She screamed, not from pain but from pure fury. Marcus! Inside the guest house, every light exploded on at once. Marcus appeared at Emma's window, saw the struggle happening on his lawn, and his entire face transformed. The door slammed open, so hard it bounced off the wall. He was running, moving faster than Victoria thought possible. Catherine rolled away from Victoria and stood, knife raised. Stay back or I swear. She didn't finish the sentence. Marcus tackled her like a professional linebacker. The knife flew from her hand, disappeared into the darkness. Catherine's head cracked against the guest house wall with a sickening sound. She crumpled to the ground. Marcus pinned her there, breathing hard, until James and 2 security guards arrived with flashlights and zip ties. FBI vehicles screeched up the driveway, sirens wailing. Victoria sat on the grass, clutching her bleeding arm, watching Marcus stand guard over his daughter's window like some kind of avenging angel. Emma never woke up, never knew she'd been in danger. The next 3 hours were complete chaos. FBI agents swarmed the entire property. Catherine was arrested for trespassing, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted burglary, and cybercrime. Turns out she'd been selling access to Victoria's security camera feeds on the dark web for months, making thousands of dollars. Other crimes emerged during questioning. She'd been skimming from Victoria's household accounts for over a year before getting caught. Had planned to rob the mansion during Victoria's Tokyo trip. Had connections to 3 other burglary rings operating in wealthy neighborhoods. This wasn't just revenge. It was business. Victoria sat in her kitchen being stitched up by a paramedic while Marcus hovered nearby with Emma asleep in his arms. The girl had woken during all the commotion, terrified and crying. Marcus refused to put her down. "You saved her life," he said for the 5th time. "You could have stayed inside, called for help, let the professionals handle it, but you ran toward danger for my daughter." "Why?" Victoria looked at Emma's peaceful sleeping face. "Because Richard ran toward danger for her. Because someone has to protect the good things in this world. Because I'm tired of watching life through cameras and being too afraid to actually live it." She met Marcus's eyes. "And because you're not just my employee, Marcus. You're my—" She stopped. Couldn't finish. Couldn't name what he was becoming to her. The social worker arrived the next afternoon. Thursday, 5 p.m., exactly on schedule like nothing had happened. Agent Reeves personally briefed her about the previous night's events, emphasizing Marcus's protective actions and Victoria's commitment to the family's safety. The social worker toured the guest house, interviewed Emma, who gushed about her own bathroom and the koi fish, and how the queen was really nice and Daddy didn't cry as much anymore. She reviewed Marcus's employment contract and made notes on her tablet. Finally, she sat with Victoria and Marcus in the main house living room. "Mr. Brennan, I'm closing your case. Emma is clearly safe, well cared for, and thriving. The anonymous complaint was filed under false pretenses. I'm recommending no further action." Marcus exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. "However," the social worker continued, "I do have concerns about one thing." Victoria tensed. "What?" "Your living arrangement. Mr. Brennan, you and your daughter reside in a guest house on Mrs. Castellanos' property. You're technically her employee. Emma is becoming emotionally attached to Mrs. Castellanos. If this employment ends suddenly for any reason, Emma loses both her home and a maternal figure simultaneously. That kind of instability can be deeply traumatic for children who've already experienced significant loss. Have you considered how you'll handle that long term?" Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances. Neither had an answer. Neither had thought past saving Emma. Now they had to face what they were actually building. And what happens if it falls apart? Common collision, if your mind is blown right now. What happens next? How do Victoria and Marcus navigate this new reality? You need to subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller for the final resolution because it's going to make you cry happy tears. Non-subscribers, you've watched to Chapter 9 and you still won't click that button? Drop your excuse in the comments. We genuinely want to understand your reasoning. 3 months later, Victoria stood in her surveillance room, doing something she never thought she'd do. She was dismantling the cameras, all of them except the exterior security system. The interior feeds were being permanently erased, cameras carefully removed from their hidden positions throughout the mansion. She didn't need them anymore. Trust, she'd learned, isn't built through observation. It's built through presence, through showing up, through dinner tables and homework help and Emma's endless questions about absolutely everything. Through Marcus's quiet competence as he transformed the estate from just a house into an actual home. The mansion had changed in ways Victoria couldn't have imagined. Emma's crayon artwork decorated the previously sterile hallways, bringing color to spaces that had been gray for too long. Mrs. DeWitt baked fresh cookies every Tuesday afternoon because Emma had requested it once and the tradition stuck. The guest house lawn hosted weekend picnics when the weather was nice. Victoria conducted business meetings from her home office now, and sometimes Emma would knock on the door to show her a drawing or ask a random question, and Victoria didn't mind the interruption. actually looked forward to it. Richard's study stayed open permanently now. Victoria worked in there sometimes, surrounded by his books and his memories. She'd moved his photographs to more prominent locations throughout the mansion instead of hiding them away. She even talked to them occasionally when no one was around. "You were right," she told his picture just last week. "About Marcus. About trust. About seeing the good in people when I was too scared to look." Marcus had become estate manager in title, but he'd evolved into something much more. Partner in making the mansion actually function. Friend in the quiet evening moments after Emma fell asleep. Steadying presence when Victoria's grief occasionally overwhelmed her without warning. They'd established routines that felt natural. Breakfast together every Sunday morning. Emma spent Wednesday afternoons with Victoria, learning about business and computers, and what Victoria jokingly called queen skills. Marcus and Victoria reviewed estate matters every Friday over coffee that always turned into hours of conversation about everything else. They talked about Richard, about Marcus's late wife, about loss and survival and the strange, unpredictable ways life rebuilds itself. They didn't touch beyond casual contact, didn't cross certain lines, but something was growing between them anyway, something careful and patient and complicated by grief and gratitude, and that social worker's warning still echoing in their minds. They were both acutely aware of Emma's attachment, aware that she called Victoria Aunt Victoria, now without anyone telling her to. Aware that this arrangement, however beneficial it felt, was technically built on employment that could end. That Victoria could decide tomorrow she wanted her space back. That Marcus could find better opportunities somewhere else. The foundation felt shaky even as the emotions felt rock solid. The shift happened on a random Tuesday that neither of them saw coming. Emma came home from school confused about a homework assignment, a family tree project. She found Victoria and Marcus in the kitchen, making dinner together. "Aunt Victoria, my teacher says family trees are supposed to be just blood relatives. But Daddy always says family is who loves you and shows up for you. Which one is right?" Victoria and Marcus exchanged glances over Emma's head, neither sure how to answer. "Your daddy's right," Victoria said carefully. "Blood doesn't make family. Love makes family. Showing up makes family. So you can be on my family tree, even though you're not my blood aunt. If you want me to be there." Emma nodded decisively like it was the simplest thing in the world. "I want you. And I want Daddy. And my mom in heaven. And Mr. Richard in heaven because he helped Daddy. That's my family." She spent the next hour drawing with intense concentration, tongue between her teeth the whole time. The result was a tree with 4 names and crayon annotations. Daddy equals the best. Mom in stars equals loves me. Mr. Richard in stars equals help Daddy. Aunt Victoria equals the queen who saved us. Emma taped it proudly to the guest house refrigerator. Marcus stared at it for a long time after she was in bed that night, his expression unreadable. "She's going to be absolutely devastated when this ends," he said quietly. "Who says it has to end?" Victoria's response surprised them both. They had the real conversation that night, sitting on the guest house porch while Emma slept safely inside. "What are we actually doing here?" Marcus asked. "Building something," Victoria answered. "But what exactly?" "I work for you. Emma lives here because you allow it. At any point, this arrangement could. I don't want it to end." Victoria interrupted him. "I know it's complicated. I know it's messy. I know there's grief and guilt and power imbalances, and a dozen reasons why this is probably a terrible idea. But I haven't felt alive in 18 months until you two showed up. You and Emma gave that back to me. You showed me that isolation wasn't protecting me from pain. It was killing me slowly. That Richard didn't leave me those cameras and instructions just to watch you work. He left them so I'd learn to trust again, to connect again, to actually live again instead of just existing." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm not him. I'll never be Richard. I don't want you to be Richard. I want you to be exactly who you are. The man who keeps promises to dead people. Who would sacrifice everything for his daughter without hesitation. Who sees the best in people even when they can't see it themselves. That's who I want in my life. In Emma's life. In this house that's finally becoming a home again." 6 more months passed. The estate manager position became permanent with a revised contract that included housing for as long as Marcus wanted it. Emma thrived in her new school, made actual friends, brought them over for playdates supervised by Aunt Victoria while Marcus worked. Victoria's business partners noticed significant changes in her. She was sharper, more engaged, took calls from home so she could be present for family dinners. She and Marcus moved slowly, carefully, building genuine friendship before anything else. No rush, no pressure, both of them understanding that what they were creating needed a foundation stronger than grief or gratitude. On the anniversary of Richard's death, they visited his grave together. All three of them. Emma left a drawing showing all four of them as stick figures holding hands. That night, Victoria stood in what used to be her surveillance room, now converted into Emma's art studio. Walls covered in colorful drawings, windows overlooking gardens where Emma played every afternoon. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" "Yeah," Victoria said, and she meant it completely. "Richard installed those cameras, so I'd see you. He knew I'd need to see before I could trust. But you know what he really gave me?" "What?" "A reason to stop watching life and start living it." She took Marcus's hand. "Thank you for showing up. Thank you for staying. Thank you for teaching me that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build, one Tuesday dinner at a time." Outside, Emma shouted about discovering a butterfly. They both went to see. Together. Like family does. Where are you watching from? Drop your location and tell us if this story made you cry. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller for more emotional journeys that restore your faith in humanity. And to everyone who watched all 10 parts without subscribing, we genuinely respect your choice, but we're curious, what would it take? Comment below. We read every single one. Share the story with someone who needs to remember that broken things can heal, that grief doesn't last forever, and that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we'd never expect.